Douglas Haig was a professional soldier. His whole life was a preparation for the moment when he took command of the King's soldiers here on the Western Front. It was the Western Front that gave him his greatest victory, but it also attracted fierce criticism that lasts to this very day.
Born into a family of whisky distillers, Douglas Haig was a typical reserved lowland Scot. But we can get further insight into his character from the diary he began as a student at Oxford.
This, in fact, is his first entry in his first proper diary, Gordon. It's written in February 1883.
Having oft-times heard of the advantages that derive from keeping a diary, I determined to keep one. The difficulty is to have a good day to begin upon. So he's got a sense of humour anyway.
Certainly.
And this goes on throughout his life.
Absolutely. And by the time of the First World War, of course, his diary was quite prolific, actually.
Right from the beginning of his military career, when he went to Sandhurst, his natural ability shone through. It was clear that he was destined for high command.
I mean, there are 35 volumes.
He did well at Sandhurst. He was promoted to senior under-officer, he came top in the Order of Merit, and he was commissioned into the Line Cavalry.
It was a good time to be a soldier. The British Empire offered plenty of opportunity for a young officer. And in all his postings, Haig showed one of his great skills, the capacity to observe and learn from others.
Back in Europe, Haig was sent off to compare German and French cavalry methods and to update the British Army's manual on cavalry tactics. It all paid off because in 1893 he was selected to attend the Staff College. In Haig's day, the Staff College was here at Camberley. Its aim was to train selected officers for senior command and staff appointments. It was and is the first step to a career to the top.
The present Earl Haig is a retired soldier and a keen student of his father's military career, but he also remembers the man.
Sir, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
He did very well at Staff College, didn't he?
Yes, Colonel Henderson, who was the chief instructor, prophesied that he would be head of the army. He was, in his view, a very promising man. And I think it was years later, my father in some way was writing about what Henderson had said. He said, well, he really must have been talking through his top hat.
But he wasn't.
No, he wasn't, no.
After Staff College, Haig was sent to fight in the Sudan, then governed from Egypt, where he risked his own life to save an Egyptian soldier, who many of his contemporaries would have left for dead.
This engraving, Gordon, depicts an officer bringing a wounded Egyptian soldier into safety under fire of the enemy at Atbara. The picture was presented to Douglas by his brother officers to commemorate the occasion. According to them, they thought he merited the VC for it.
It was an incident that I think reveals what a fine man Haig was. Not only brave and humane, but also modest. He didn't even tell his own wife what he'd done.
Even she isn't really sure whether it actually happened, whether it's allegorical, whether it's a myth or what. And then everybody really forgets about it. But you've actually discovered a letter that sheds quite a lot of light on it.
Well, amongst the Haig papers here in the National Library of Scotland, we have a letter from Haig to his sister Henrietta. I was able to pick up a poor dervish of an Egyptian who was wounded in the shoulder and had given himself up for lost. And I put him in front of my saddle and carried him to the guns where we had some spare horses. It's his first action. He must have been shocked himself. The difference between his studies at Camberley and his first active service must have been immense for him.
Yes, because he's come from sort of studying it in theory, and then suddenly he's faced with blood and guts in reality.
Absolutely.
And he does well.
He does well.
It was a good start, but it was at the War Office from 1905 that Haig really demonstrated what I think was his clearest talent. He was a brilliant and visionary military administrator. Haig transformed the British Army was some of the most far-reaching military reforms ever. One was the setting up of the first real reserve army, the forerunner to today's territorial army.
Perhaps Haig's greatest achievement was his part in the creation of the British Expeditionary Force, or the BEF. It was stationed in England, but ready to be deployed to fight a war anywhere in the world. It wasn't very big by European standards, just 1 cavalry and 6 infantry divisions, but it was more than we'd ever had before. It was well equipped, it was well trained, it was well led, and it had its own staff.
If the First World War had never broken out, Haig would still have got to the top of his profession, but by now the world would probably have forgotten him. But the Kaiser was about to hand him the greatest opportunity and risk of his career.